am a 32-year-old woman who recently became a housewife after getting married to my husband. We initially met on a blind date, and despite his aggressive approach, we started dating and eventually tied the knot. It was surprising for many people that we got married just 6 months into our relationship, especially considering my dating history. Before my husband, I had been in a long-term relationship with a man named Kurt. We had been together since our freshman year of college, spending a total of 12 years as a couple. We lived together for a significant period, and friends and family would often tease us about when we would finally get married. Naturally, I had assumed that Kurt and I would eventually marry. However, unexpectedly, Kurt abruptly ended our relationship. It was a deeply personal and challenging experience for me when Kurt said, "I know this is very selfish of me, but I want you to break up with me." I was taken aback and confused by his sudden declaration. I questioned him, "What? Why are you saying this so suddenly?" Kurt explained that he couldn't envision a future with me anymore, leaving me heartbroken. Despite my attempts to salvage the relationship, Kurt remained firm in his decision, and we ultimately parted ways. I apologize for the way I handled this situation and how it affected you. It was a difficult time for me, but regardless of what I may have said to Kurt, I realize now that we cannot continue our relationship. He insisted that he wanted to break up without giving me any good reasons, and I was just so angry that in the end I agreed to break up with him. The first few months after the breakup were really rough for me, as I felt like I had wasted my precious 20s. Because of him, I drank so much that my friends were worried about me, and to top it all off, as I was also drunk, I began to pick up any guys I could find, and seeing this, my friends rushed to stop me and forced me to take a taxi back home. Seeing me like that, my friend thought that if I continued like that, it would be a bad idea. So she set me up with a blind date where I met my current husband, Tim. My husband is a man known to be elite as he graduated from a prestigious university, and he was working for a major corporation. He is 2 years older than me, and his parents told him that it was time for him to bring someone home, for him to get married to. So he was looking for his marriage partner, and he aggressively approached me, so I fell for him easily. Looking back now, I regret that I could have made a more logical decision instead of just deciding superficially, but my husband had a great family and personal background. It didn't look that bad, so I guess I had no choice but to be deceived by him. Besides, to someone who was dumped after going out for 12 years. A partner like him for a marriage was just perfect at that time for me. All of these reasons, and with that timing, this made me decide to marry my husband. When I married Tim, he asked me to fully focus on being a housewife. I liked my job that I was working at, but not so much that I wanted to continue it against my husband's will, so that's why I became a full-time housewife from then on. I supported my husband by doing my best at all the house chores. So I think our marriage was going well in its own way. But at the same time, there were times where I felt really bored of it too. Not working meant that I had so much time on my hands as a housewife. If I thought like that, then probably I'm more the type where I like to be busy working away. But since I got married and became a full-time housewife, I thought I should properly do my part for my husband. And so the days passed by in the blink of an eye, and a year had passed since we got married. So, since then, nothing had changed so much, and we continue to go about our daily lives as usual. In my husband's family, he's the youngest as he has 2 elder sisters, Rachel and Julia, and his sisters are very friendly and nice to me, and they would often come over to our house to visit, but my husband would always make an unhappy face when Rachel and Julia comes over to visit us. Rachel and Julia were kind, but they were also very caring and reliable, and whenever my husband did something, they would get very angry at him. So maybe because of that, my husband gets a little nervous when Rachel and Julia were around, but I had never seen Rachel or Julia getting angry at Tim like that. So when he told me about that part, I didn't take him that serious about it. Then, as another year was about to end, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law, Laura, all of a sudden. "Hello, Laura, you called me all of a sudden. So did something happen? You and Tim should come visit me this New Year's. Pardon me. You didn't come last year, right? So that's why you should come this year. I'll show you how to spend the New Year's in our house. Saying just that, Laura hung up the phone. Who was it from? It was from your mother. She wants us to visit her for the New Year's. Well, it's true. We didn't get to go last year. It's been a while since we went, so I guess we should go then. I thought that I was going to spend a relaxing time at home for this New Year's. I thought that I would be drinking beer, watching the TV, and taking it easy during the New Year's holidays. I had no idea that I would be going to Laura's house and to have her contact us on Christmas Eve with only a week or so to go until the New Year's. Originally, we had not visited my parents-in-law that much, and that's because my husband didn't want to visit them frequently. Last year I did ask him if we didn't have to go during Christmas and New Year's or not, but he refused, saying things like, "It's okay. My family doesn't really expect a lot from us." Well, I think it was probably because he would have more chances to see his sisters if we visited at that time. So that's why we would visit them every month or so on a day when there was nothing going on. I was a little depressed about visiting my in-laws for the New Year's. It's because I had a feeling that Laura did not like me very much when I visited Laura's house. She always talked only to Tim. And treated me as if I was not there. My father-in-law, Jim, would talk to me so that I wouldn't feel unwanted, but it was not uncommon for Laura to not even look at me once when I talked to my husband about it before. He just said, "It's probably just your imagination. You're too self-conscious." And the conversation ended. So I can't really rely on my husband regarding Laura. So why should I do this coming New Year's? But since Jim will be there and Rachel and Julia will probably be there. So I guess I won't have to feel too horrible. So I decided not to worry too much about it. And the New Year's Eve came in no time. My husband and I finished cleaning our own house in the morning, had lunch and drove to Jim and Laura's house. My in-laws' house is 2 hours away from ours, so we arrived there around 2 p.m. When I got out of the car, I noticed that Jim's car was not there. Worried about his absence. I asked my husband where he had gone, and he told me that Jim was probably picking up Rachel and Julia. I was relieved to hear that, and my husband and I went to the front door and pressed the doorbell. "Yes, I'll open the door soon," Laura called out, and a few minutes later the front door opened. "Oh. Hello. Thank you for coming here all the way. Welcome back. Laura, it's so nice to see you." Laura glanced at me, smiled only at Tim, and said, Come on in. There's cake and tea. Let's eat." She did it again. This is how she would ignore me. Feeling a little uncomfortable, I tried to go inside the house. But then Laura stood in front of me. "Hey, you can't come in here yet." "Excuse me. You need to go buy these first," saying that my mother-in-law, Laura, handed me a piece of paper, which had a list on it. There were many ingredients listed on the paper, including beef, lettuce, tomatoes, mushrooms, beer, and so on. Is she asking me to actually get all the things in this list? You better hurry up. Okay. Oh, where is the supermarket around here? When I asked her that, Laura looked annoyed. "It's your fault that you rarely show up here, isn't it? If you came here often, you would know where the supermarket is. Wouldn't you check where the supermarkets are by yourself?" "Okay, then what about the food expenses? Shall I just pay for it and ask you to pay back after?" When I said that, Laura's eyes widened and she became angry. You rarely come visit my house, but you want me to pay for it? I can't believe you." Laura began to shout. So Tim came over to see what was going on. "What's wrong, Mom?" "How, Tim?" "Honey, Alice just tried to make me pay for the groceries." "What?" "Hey, don't annoy Mom like that. You should just pay for that stuff instead. What? But then I'll pay it out from our family budget. Is that okay with you? Huh? Pay it from your credit card. Don't pay it from our family budget. No way. Just hurry up and go. We're about to have our tea time, so don't ruin it, saying that Laura slammed the front door on me loudly. How unbelievable. I was so angry at Laura's attitude, as well as the mama's boy husband and his action. I was so mad that I crumpled up the list, threw it right in front of the front door, and got in the car to go home. On the way home, I stopped at a supermarket and bought some amazing appetizers, steak and beer. I arrived home at 5 p.m., so I took a bath to relax and drank the cold delicious beer while eating the appetizers by myself from about 6 p.m. I was enjoying my own time and I was watching TV while getting a little bit tipsy. Suddenly, I looked over at my phone, which I had put on silent to see if my husband had called, but there was no phone call or even a text message from my husband. Even though I had come home without shopping for some reason, that made me angry too. I was getting irritated, so I decided to distract myself by eating the delicious steak. As I was eating my steak, the doorbell rang all of a sudden, and as I was thinking, who could it be at this hour, and opened the door. I saw my in-laws and Tim standing there. To my surprise, Rachel began to apologize by saying, "I'm sorry for my stupid mother and brother." Both Laura and Tim's eyes were bright red. This was not because they were drunk or anything, but because they were yelled at by Rachel, Julia, and Jim, and they were probably crying, being forced by Rachel and Julia. Tim and Laura began to apologize. Well, they sounded like they had to apologize because they were forced to. After I took Tim into the house and the in-laws left, as soon as my husband saw that his sisters and his father were gone, he immediately became angry, saying, "Why didn't you cover for me?" He continued to complain about it, but I just ignored him. And a few days later, I met my high school friends for the first time in a while and had lunch with them. But on the way home I saw my husband having an affair with another woman. He was walking arm in arm with a young woman. I quickly took a photo of the two of them from the shadows and sent it to my husband over text message, asking him what this was all about. Then he read the message, but he didn't reply back and ignored the text message as I waited for my husband to return home, angry at him for not replying back to me. He brought back his lover, and Laura with him. Laura and his lover came in without my permission. Then Laura began to say, "This woman is much more suitable for my son than you, so you should leave my son." She even said, "Because you are unworthy." My son ended up having an affair, so there will be no alimony. Tim also took advantage of the situation and said, "It's your fault." "It's not my fault." "Okay." His lover was grinning with a victorious look on her face. Then my husband brought out the signed divorce papers. I pretended to be upset and said, "Hey, give me some time to think about it," and walked out. My husband thought that I was panicking, so he grinned and said, "Come back soon. We'll be waiting for you." I went into a cafe and immediately called Rachel and Julia about it. They both came right away and I played them what Tim and Laura has said to me, which I had recorded secretly. Both Rachel and Julia was so angry and said to me, "Please send that recording to our father as well." And after sending it, the three of us then went back to the house where Tim, Laura, and Tim's lover was. My husband and Laura were so surprised that Rachel and Julia had also arrived, that they fell off their chairs. That's enough. Yeah. We're always angry at you, but how can we get you to understand that what you're doing is wrong here? Both Rachel and Julia got mad at Tim first, and soon after Rachel and Julia also got mad at Laura. "This is what happens when you spoil him, Mom." "Mommy mean, what is wrong with you? What kind of nerve do you have to approve your own son's affair?" Both Tim and Laura were frightened and tried to blame on Tim's lover. Then both Rachel and Laura put their faces close to Tim's lover and glared at her. Tim's lover got so scared of them that she became teary-eyed and trembled, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Rachel and Julia then made her husband promise by saying, "You will get a divorce, Tim, but you must pay the alimony to Atlas." Well, there was no way not to pay for alimony when Tim even admitted that he was having an affair by himself. Then, as I was signing the divorce papers, Laura's phone rang. Apparently, she received a text message from Jim. "Oh my God, what shall I do? Jim is saying that he's going to divorce me." Laura was panicking and clung desperately to my husband with tears in her eyes, but Tim had to pay alimony to me because of Rachel and Julia, so he couldn't afford to worry about his own mother right now. Well, don't ask me about it. I don't even have the capacity to look after you." That was what he was saying to Laura. After that, we successfully got divorced. And by the way, Tim's lover disappeared from Tim after paying alimony because she was too scared of Rachel and Julia. And it seems that Jim really divorced Laura too. And now she had forced herself into Tim's place so that she could live with them. They are now living together and Tim is the one paying off the alimony and cover living expenses for both Laura and him. But the affair was discovered by someone at work somehow, and word spread through Tim's company, and he was given a pay cut. So apparently, he's living poorly. It's what both Tim and Laura deserve. Meanwhile, Rachel had asked me if I wanted to join her company because someone quit at her place, so I went in for a job interview. They hired me as a full-time employee and I am now working hard with Rachel, and both Rachel and Julia took me to a bar after work to celebrate for getting a new job and divorcing Tim. You know, this is our go-to place. They've had a new bartender for a couple of years now, and he's nice and handsome. Wow. Really? Is he a young man? No, I think he's about your age, Alice. He's in his early 30s. I think while having this conversation with them, we arrived at the bar. I followed Rachel and Julia and sat at the counter. "Welcome," the bartender said that, so I looked at who he was. Kurt. Oh, Les, to my surprise there, he was my ex-boyfriend who dumped me after 12 years of dating. So I said, "Excuse me, I should head home to Rachel and Julia," and I was about to leave. Then Kurt said, "Wait," and stopped me. "Can you give me a minute? There's something I need to tell you." Okay. With that, we went outside to talk. "I'm really sorry about what happened with us. It's okay now. I was pretty shocked that you suddenly dumped me, but it's all in the past now. I mean, you're a bartender now, right? Did you quit your job?" "No, I'm still working at the company." "Oh, so you're doing this as a side job. Why are you doing that?" "I was just trying to explain about that. Actually, my father got very sick 2 years ago and he can no longer work at his factory." "What?" "Without him, the factory wouldn't run well and the medical expenses for his illness were pretty expensive, and at that time, situation was really bad back at home. As a result, we had no choice but to close my father's factory. We were left with a debt of several $1,000s plus my father's medical expenses were still expensive, so I couldn't really ask you to marry me being in that situation because it would be so embarrassing for you to have a husband covered in debt as soon as we get married, right? Didn't want to make you unhappy, so that's why I just dumped you back then, Alice, but I'm really sorry for making you feel horrible. Well, I thought that I would never see you again. So now that we've miraculously met again, I felt I had no choice but to tell you." "You idiot." "Huh? Then you should have talked to me first about it. You just left me without giving me any reasons. So do you know how hard it was for me to accept that?" "Oh, I'm sorry." "Well, it can't be helped now, but are you still in debt?" "I'll finally finish paying it off this month. It's a huge relief, you know, and my father's discharged from the hospital for now." "Well, I'm really glad to hear that. You know, Alice, I won't say that. I want to start over with you right now. So will you just be my friend again?" Yeah, sure. We walked back into the bar together, and then seeing that Rachel and Julia both cheered for me happily in the end, Rachel, Julia, and I made Kurt buy us a round of drinks, saying that it was his fault that I married to Tim, which ended up in divorce as a joke. Following the events, Kurt and I rekindled our relationship and gradually grew closer. Eventually, we started dating again, and it wasn't long before Kurt proposed to me. With joyous celebrations from my friends and family, including Rachel and Julia, who believed that Kurt was a far better match for me than Tim, we embraced the journey towards marriage. After tying the knot, our love blossomed even further as we welcomed our son, Theo, into our lives. Kurt, Theo, and I have been living together in happiness and harmony. It brings me immense joy to create precious memories with my beloved husband and our son, whom I adore deeply. Rachel and Julia have been wonderful and supportive companions. I feel fortunate to have sisters like them in my life. Alice successfully cut ties with Tim and Laura, and the faithful reunion with Kurt was truly heartwarming. Moving forward, my sincere wish is to continue living a blissful life with my cherished family. Thank you, Alice, for being a part of our journey. Until the end, I extend my gratitude to all our viewers. Please subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for our upcoming videos. We look forward to sharing more with you in the future.